Hey everybody, I am back with Inquisitorial Q&A episode 7. I actually have a number of questions today, and so I want to thank everybody that's been asking questions regularly and those that jumped in last time and threw a question in when, maybe I hadn't in a while. I kind of appreciate that. So I've got plenty to work with today. Couple things, just real quick, is if I have to stop the video real quick and cut the video and cut back, it's only because I've got some work happening at my house today. Some folks pouring concrete, and if one of my kids comes running to my hobby room door because there's somebody at the door and they need me to do something, that's why that will be the case. But besides that, yeah, I think that's pretty much it. I hope everybody's summer's going real well. This is August now, and I can't believe I've done this for 7 months now. It doesn't seem that long. But yeah, I think what I'm going to do today is the format that I have in the past, and that is, or just recently, and that is I'm going to work a little bit while I answer these questions. I'm not really that great at doing detail work when it comes to thinking about questions. Having said that, I find it easier and a bit more productive to do some grunt work, like I'm just putting a base coat on some bases for my Musk and Tomahawk civilians. Last time I think I was just painting yellow walls while I was doing this. I find that more comfortable than just staring at the screen and answering question after question. Some people in their Q&As have excellent camera presence and are very comfortable with that. I'll be quite honest, I find this casual environment of just working while I'm doing this to be much better, and I hope that you folks are painting too and doing something while you're watching this and as well, so it's actually productive for you too. So thanks again to everyone that's asked questions, and yeah, let's get started. So first one is from Mini Warzone, and that is Pete over at Mini Warzone. He says, great video. I would like to ask, since you are very much into the Marvel game, how solid is the rule set? As I was almost at the point of investing into this one myself. How easy are the mechanics of the game seem? Okay, well, Pete, I think I wouldn't describe the rule set as solid, and what I mean by that is I think it's a great initial rule set for the game, and I'm really happy I got into it, but I'm just going to kind of clarify that. It's the first edition of this rule set, and although some rules are definitely right out of the box, like first edition when the game's introduced, like very polished and ready to go, and like great from the very beginning. From what I've heard of the folks that with the Batman game from Night Models, that wasn't really the case. Like it started out as just a PDF, not even like something that looked like a rule book, and it took a while to get to its present state, where now they offer it as a really nice rule book, and you have to buy that rule book. The Marvel rules were not exactly free when they were first offered. They came with the starter pack, but at relatively inexpensive price for an edition. Like in my opinion, and they were in a nice little kind of pocket rule book. They looked pretty good. It looked pretty good as far as I'm concerned. But it is early days. There were definitely a lot of things that had to be fact in the rules pretty soon. But having said that, let me talk about some of the positive stuff. Positive stuff is there are some more unique game mechanics to the Marvel game that you don't really, in my opinion, see a lot in other war games, let alone superhero war games. The big one that I'll just mention is just the way you can interact with scenery in the game is it's much more interactive than a lot of games that I see. The fact that you can pick up like a car and throw it at somebody, or throw it at a building or something like that. The fact that you can just pick up either a friendly character or an enemy character and throw them at something. And you can just grab, like, a mailbox. Literally, it'll have a size and a structural component assigned to it based on its size, which is in the rulebook. And you can use it as a weapon. and throw it at somebody. And so I actually think that's really cool. It adds a nice element to the game. And so when I look at a new rule set, I do look at how smooth and how fun, you know, the mechanics are. But then I also look to see whether they're offering something kind of unique or, you know, that makes it stand out. The other piece, and I don't think this game's the only one that does this, but they have just the ability where you can react with superpowers. You have reactive powers. So like even though it's not your miniature's turn, it has the ability to react with superpowers to something that's happening to it. Like an attack that's happening to it. And so it really allows for a lot of interesting situations where you have all these different Marvel characters, all with different kinds of powers and all kinds of active and reactive and passive powers. And so like there's just so many different combinations of things that could be happening like with each game based on the release of these characters and all these different powers that can match up and things. And so I think that that's really cool. I found that after playing it for a bit that the game runs pretty smooth. I mean, there are definitely some components of things that I haven't done so much in the run-throughs that the game has, like, you know, they're like falling from buildings and just certain things like I've just not simulated yet that are in the rules. But for the pieces that I've done, I actually found that it's actually quite cool. I think I've heard some other folks on channels around the Marvel channel kind of address the same thing, like in saying like, well, the miniatures a lot of people feel look really good, you know, and it's Marvel, so that part it sort of passes the test. Like, are these miniatures I want to paint? And if you're a Marvel fan, that's the case usually. But then, is it just a game that they whip together to be able to play a miniature game, like to sell models? And I honestly think that they have big plans for this game, and I don't really think that's the case. I would just say that when getting into it, you do have to feel like you're a little bit on early days and along for a ride that's going to happen, like with this game. You know, but it still has places to go that we haven't seen it actually in its full manifestation. So yeah, that's probably my best answer. I know I'm really happy that I got into it. There are a couple things I was thinking about maybe doing a little differently, where we have tokens typically, like in the game, where you have to have counters. I was thinking of maybe using like a 12-sided die in the future and just having that as like my power tokens and just going down, you know, from that, so I don't have so much stuff like on the table. That might be, you know, and I think that you could potentially do that without really there being an issue for the most part. I can't think of one, because there are abilities that take away your power tokens. Like somebody can stun you, which basically makes you a bit weaker and can take away power tokens to be able to do things. And I think all you would do is just, if you had 8 power tokens and somebody stun you, it would just be like spending them, like you just move it down to 6. But I have to look into that. I think that might be the only thing I might change a little bit, just for myself. Yeah, so thanks for the question. Yeah, and I know it's always tough to resist getting into a game, but you've resisted it so far. But maybe if you get into it in the future, that'll be cool. Okay, thanks very much, Pete. Ralph Astley, thanks for the answer. What building, specific or generic, or what terrain piece would you most like to be able to purchase for your games that is currently not available commercially, and what scale would it be in? Well, that's a pretty specific question there. That's a good one. I actually know exactly. I've struggled because there is a piece of terrain that I've wanted that I don't really have one to my liking that I can find. Even if I can find it, it's usually like a really old piece that's not in the kind of materials that I want. And that is my favorite thing that I would like to get. And I'll start with the scale first, because I primarily really just play 28 mil. Marvel is technically 35, but even with that I use a lot of 28 mil stuff and it seems to work fine. But what I would like is a North American manor. Similar, for those of you that have seen my bolt action chateau, sort of that I use for musket and tomahawks too, I would really like a very typical looking large manor that's colonial, either French Indian War, American War of Independence. Really, it's 7-year difference, so I think it'd be pretty much the same. Where you have like your chimneys on each side, fairly symmetrical, very much an Americana style house, like kind of manor house. For those of you that watch Turn, I haven't been watching the second season as much, but I watched the first season. But the one that the main character's father lives in, he's sort of not British, he's like American, but he's sort of like a town mayor, kind of. He has this really beautiful Americana house. I would really like that for my musket and tomahawk games, and for when I eventually do American War of Independence at some point. Now, I'd like it ideally in MDF to match my other stuff that I have. If a really nice resin one came out, I would still go for it. The only ones that I've actually seen, and I'm not sure if they were in the right scale, but I have seen some folks do some ones similar in resin, but they were really old models, and the detail, I don't know if some of you know what I mean, but some of the old resin buildings that served a purpose, but like the detail was really rough, like and soft and rounded and just not crisp like in the current MDF ones. And so if somebody came out with a resin one where it was quite detailed and crisp in its lines and things, and I would still go for that as well. I'd love to have something like that. As a matter of fact, I'd probably buy several. Now, I've done recently, in the last video, I was painting what's technically called, I don't know if they said townhome too, but it definitely said plantation house for the Sarissa Precision one. And I really like that one, but it's quite small. You can fit, particularly if you have the interior there, I would love something really double the size of it, is what I'd be kind of looking for. That one is sort of tall and thin. I'd be looking for something more along the lines, like I said, of that bolt-action chateau that I have. Yeah, so that would be what I would want, Ralph. Good question. Idic Beer, really nice chat, mate. I would love to know, what is your favorite Star Trek series and why? Well, I'm not a huge Star Trek fan, actually. Although there were times in my life where I've liked it and watched it, I do think it's a good. There have been good movies, and the show has been great at various times. The easiest thing, and I'll just add to that. I'll just say, like, I really liked. I haven't seen the new movie yet for Star Trek, like the one that's just come out. Even though I'm not a huge Star Trek fan, I really liked the first one and the latest reboot. I was really pleasantly surprised with it, and I thought that they did an amazing job rebooting the series. The second one was less memorable for me, the one where they brought Khan back. Partly, it may be that I just loved the original Wrath of Khan, and it just, really, that second one just didn't do it for me as much. It's not that it was a bad movie, like I don't think I walked away from it saying, oh, it was a bad movie, but I wasn't, like, awed by it as much, where I do kind of get awed by movies that I really like. And so, series, it'd be really easy for me to just say the original series, because that's the one that I've watched the most. That's what I watched the most reruns of when I was a little kid, and it's the one that really defined everything, and it's also got like that sort of stereotypical use of cinema special effects before we had all the CGI that just makes it so memorable and charming in a lot of ways. I'm not going to say that. There would be some days where I could that would be the easy answer. I would just say that. As well, the reboot of the series with Next Generation was amazing. From a story perspective, what they did and the issues that they did, and just incorporating the technology of the day to kick it up a notch. They clearly did it. I mean, like, in my opinion. And so I could say that as well for that reason. But what I'm going to say, and I'm interested in your comments on this, Nick, just because you know like a billion times more than I do about Star Trek. I really liked Deep Space Nine. What's funny, it'll be really funny if that's considered like the worst one ever, because I just don't know. But I really liked it because of the time that I watched it. And it was just very different, like the fact that it happens on a space station. I like the Kardashians and some of the new races the races that they focused on. Kardashians or Kardashians, I'm not sure. But I was, this is sort of weird, but I was in college and I was taking a lot of science classes and I was like all about learning. Like, you know, at the time my life was pretty much work in college. And I was really working hard, like, to get into a science program that needed to accept me. And, you know, so at the time, like, just the fact that I liked fiction to begin with already, but it was sort of like something that really is based on the future and technology and science and all this stuff. I was just watching it at a time where I was just really interested in watching the show. For various reasons. Like, I was really watching it as it was happening, like as the series was being made, where even with Next Generation, I don't know that I did that as much. I kind of watched a lot of reruns and things. Deep Space Nine, I was just really engaged to watch the show at that time. And I think that's the only time I've watched a Star Trek series on TV while it was being released and anticipated like the shows coming out. So it's Deep Space Nine. That would be the one. Good question, Nick. Thanks very much. Jackmaster, any interest in the Old West period or games in that period? He also says, you mentioned Rogue Trader. Would revisiting that edition be of any interest? Yeah, you know, like, I have a big interest in doing Western gaming. I'm at a point now, for those of you that watched one of my videos recently, you know that not only am I acting on my fantasy miniatures that I've purchased, and I'm starting Age of Sigmar with folks, but I'm announcing a new project this fall that's supposed to be a really big historical project. I can tell you it's not Western, but with having just started the Marvel game this year and really doing a lot with that, and then now the Age of Sigmar, and then this other historical one, it's really unlikely I'm going to do anything else anytime soon besides those things. In addition to all the stuff I already do, because I'm still playing Saga and Musket Tomahawks and 40K, and I play like the Fantasy Flight games too. So it's a lot, really, and I'm actually starting to really want to slow down, you know, on my gaming, like the amount of stuff I get into, if anything. I just think I play too much. I have certain games now that I have what I need to play it, but I'm not buying anything more for it. Like, I've picked that one. I can just tell you right now that, you know, like, I had no intention of actually doing too much more with Saga as far as like getting many more armies and things like that and having multiples of them. Like, I'm quite happy with my Anglo-Danes. I do have a friend that's trading me my Drop Zone Commander for, because I never really acted on that, and he's doing a swap with me and giving me his Normans that are unpainted for Saga. But so I don't really count that because it was just sort of, I'm not like going out and buying, and it's just sort of to have when I do want to paint them up eventually. But I have games that I'm just not getting more of. Like, I like bolt action, but I'm not actually going to get another army. I'm just going to stay with my Americans and continue to paint what I have with that. And so, the Old West, it would require new terrain, and I think that's one of the reasons why I didn't actually just jump on it. Just because the idea, I don't really enjoy games unless I can have a pretty decent board. And the board, like, and the time and money it takes to just get like a board together, to me is the biggest deterrent to getting into a new game by far at this point. It really isn't painting the models and the price of the miniatures in most cases. It's actually getting in a new board together. Like, because I just don't enjoy games without a good board and a realistic scenery. Just not enjoyable to me. And so I would one day, like I would see myself one day doing probably a skirmish Western game, which I think is what it probably lends itself to. I suppose you could have bigger battles with the American cavalry and, perhaps the Mexican army and like various things. But for me, I would probably want to do more skirmish. I like the idea of doing some Apaches or some Delawares, like in Oklahoma. And just kind of doing the Wild West, even some. I don't remember the name. I'm trying to think of the Banditos, the Mexican kind of outlaw types. Like, I love that kind of stuff. All the cinematic stuff. I think it would be so much fun, but I guess I've kind of paved my way over the next bit as far as games I'm going to get into. I just don't think I have the room. And painting time on the shelf and budget and everything. So, I heard you mentioning that, Jankmaster, that you're getting into it, and I'd really be interested in seeing that, like what you're kind of going to be doing. Hopefully it won't actually be too good, because then I'll be probably forced to get into it too. If I really like it. That's kind of what happens to us, I think. You guys are thinking, this guy Palmer just has no will whatsoever. He's just... Thanks very much. You had one more here. Sorry, I got so into that question. So the Rogue Trader, would that edition be of interest? Yeah, I like the idea of that. I mentioned Rogue Trader. I'll be honest with you. I was told that, like, when I played in 1988, that was likely Rogue Trader, but going back that far, I don't really even remember the rules. Like, I was a horrible painter. I just, like, slapped on base paint. I was, like, never really learned how to paint miniatures properly in any way. I was doing orcs, and I relied a lot on a lot of my friends with, like, the rules at that time. They kind of got me into it, and I didn't really know what I was doing. I never really tabletop wargame before that, and I didn't really know what I was doing. And so I don't even have the stuff that I had back then. I don't even know what happened to it. And so when you say, like, oh, would you be interested in kind of doing that again? I think when I said I played that edition, I think the assumption is that I knew what I was doing and that, like, I had experienced the game and I could comment on it. I'll be honest, I don't think I could, like, at this point. I was, like, a young kid at that point, and I didn't know what I was doing, and I don't remember half of it, honestly. And so when I actually started to paint again in 2012 and started to do all this stuff, it was like starting from scratch, because it had been so long, and even when I did, I wasn't that experienced. I was just kind of like going through the motions, trying to just figure it all out, and never really learned how to paint well. So, good questions though. Thanks for that. Smitty, thanks Palmer. If you've already answered this before, you can skip it. What do you enjoy most? What do you enjoy most? The hobby? Painting, making terrain, or playing games? Oh, and let's throw in there why. My opinion on this changes, because I do enjoy both. I like playing the game, so I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I just like to paint. And I love the painting, aspect as well. And the reason why that's a really difficult and a great question is that probably any time I've been asked this in the past, I probably would always say the painting. Because I do that like 90% of the time. I mean, really the hobby is the time in the hobby room for me most of the time. Even though I, at best, might be able to get 2 games in a week if I'm doing well. Like, 1 is probably the average. And then there'd be times where I definitely don't play a game in a week. And even though I really enjoy that, if you compare it to the amount of time I spend painting and modeling and things like that, it's minuscule. And so I have to enjoy this painting part, or else, that is really the hobby for me. Now, I know some people get stuff painted for them, and it doesn't make it, like, they can enjoy this with us and not paint, and that's fair. But that's just never the way I've done the hobby. I don't really own anything other than the Fantasy Flight games where they paint them for you. It's like a tabletop game, but it's painted for you. Outside of that, I don't have anything that normally would be painted that I've ever had somebody paint for me. I Not that there's anything wrong with it. So the reason why it's a difficult question is that lately, like when I did that Marvel, the Marvel walkthrough of the rules, and I did a solo game, I really found solo gaming relaxing and just fun, and also like intellectually stimulating in a different way. Like instead of being there and trying to win, which I always would try to do, like in a game where you have an opponent. I mean, we always try to do well, and it's not fun if you don't. I found having a table set up in a room, like my hobby room, walking away from it after a number of rounds, and because I had to do something, and maybe even the next day, just coming back to it the way it was. Outside of my normal painting time in my hobby room and my hobby experience, I found that really relaxing and enjoyable, like simulating and playing a game like that. It's sort of like having the chessboard set up in the house, either for an opponent that comes around every once in a while, or even there, you playing both sides, like over a number of weeks. It's that sort of intellectually stimulating, meditative piece to gaming I've never really done before, and like I've never kind of approached it that way before. So the answer is the painting. And but I needed to go through that to emphasize that it's kind of changing and it's evolving, like the gaming side. And I love the gaming. I do game quite a bit. It's not that I don't. I think those of you either that see the Bat Reps or just hear me talk, I'm gaming, like, because I talk about games that I play. But and I do this for that purpose. Have very few things that I paint just to paint them. But the painting side is the most relaxing, and I like approaching a project, and I like becoming a better artist when it comes to painting miniatures. I like that, like, constant trying to evolve. And so it still would be the painting, but it's becoming more and more difficult to say that, where I used to easily say that. I really like the gaming too, and some of the solo play stuff is changing it, and I really enjoy that. And I could see myself doing more and more solo playing games at my house. For those of you that are my friends locally that watch the channel, there's a couple. That doesn't mean I don't want to play games. I'm not saying I'm playing solo gaming to stop gaming with folks. It's not that at all. It's just a different thing. It's a different feeling to do that than to play against an opponent where it's just a bit more competitive. All right, great question. Helcarex, great answer on the types of ale you enjoy. I am a big fan of Irish Reds or most German Pilsners. Which Scotch is always in the cabinet? I'm a big fan of Glenmorangie, Glenfiddich, and Glenlivet. I'll always have a bottle on hand for relaxing in the evening. I actually, I don't know if I've had the Glenmorangie. I think I might have. I definitely have had Glenfiddich and Glenlivet. And I like all of them. Definitely like all of them. I've grabbed a couple here, just so because sometimes I just don't remember these things. But I couldn't. Sometimes I have to look at them when I see like all the bottles just to even remember. Yes, that's the one I would keep buying and I like. And I actually grabbed something else too because I just thought it was noteworthy to grab. The funniest thing is that one of the Scotch that got me into drinking Scotch, because the first time I had a Glenfiddich 12 year and had it neat, I didn't want anything to do with Scotch. It was just my palate wasn't mature enough for it. The Glenfiddich 12 year, I would say, is best with some water. It's not nearly as smooth as some of the more aged ones. Personal opinion. Having said that, Dewar's made a brand of Scotch. I don't know if I'm hoping they still make it because I need to get a bottle. I was looking in my cabinet for it and I was like, where is it? Where is it? It's not there. But it's called Stronach, and they made this brand because the they claim that there was a distillery that was destroyed, but there were just 2 bottles left, and it was an old distillery, and they analyzed it, and they brought this brand back called Stronach. And it's probably not the best, by any means. It's not like the best Scotch out there, but it is a step up from the first shelf, kind of, and still very affordable, but still actually a bit smooth. Not as smooth as some, but great one to start with if you're not wanting to spend a lot of money. And for a while there, I was just buying it, and that was sort of my go-to, and then I started branching off from it. Now, apparently I like it so much because there's none in my cabinet right now, so you've reminded me that I need to actually get another one. So Stronach is one of them. That would be the one that I kind of started with, and that's one of the reasons why. Now, these other ones are probably, I consider, better than Stronach, and they're ones I've moved to. You mentioned Glenfiddich. 15-year Glenfiddich. Now I have both the 12, the 15, and the 18 in my cabinet. Even though the 18 is, I think, a little bit more money, and it's 18 years instead of 15. I like the 15 because this one is, what they call it, our unique Solera. It marries. It's matured in sherry, bourbon, and new oak casks. So they essentially take these casks and they soak them in sherry and bourbon, and then they put the Scotch in there and they let it mature over time. And you can really taste it. It's got a really nice flavor, like some off flavors that are really nice. And so this is one of my go-tos. I really enjoy it. I enjoy it more than the 18 year. So that's one. This is a bit of a cheap out, but I showed this already, like in my first Inquisitorial Q&A. I think it was my first or second, I showed Glenrothes. By far, like one of my go-tos that I always like to go back to, Glenrothes. And because I like this one, my wife did buy me one of their premium ones. And it was like a higher shelf item. It was like, I don't know if it was Father's Day or my birthday, something like that. She got that for me, and it's actually quite good. It was a higher shelf item, but to be honest, I actually like the regular stuff here better. I don't know if I'm just more used to it. And then lastly, this isn't a Scotch, so I've mentioned 3, but this isn't a Scotch, but you can see just by how much is actually drank out of it. This is actually a bourbon, and I like bourbon too. They taste very different, as you probably know. This is Woodford Reserve. This is out of Kentucky, and my wife and I were on our 10th wedding anniversary and staying at a place, and they had something that was foreign to me, and that is they had this little room that they often served lunch in, like free lunch kind of. You would just go down there in the middle of the day and they'd have tea, they'd have lunch, and it was all provided as part of the experience. But in the evening when you went down, they had an open bar with no bartender. It was just like, you could go in there and they had a little card and you just mark what you take and they charge it on your bill. And I was thinking, you gotta be kidding me. Just go in and it's the honor system? Like, oh my gosh. And so they had this. Now, yes, I did check it, that I took it, a shot of it, but I sipped on this because I like my Scotch neat, so I poured some bourbon neat. This Woodford Reserve I really enjoy in the winter, sipping on this, having one at the end of the day and just sipping on it. I like a bourbon as well as a Scotch too, so yeah, so those are mine, the ones that I like. So great question. Tattoo for you, Richard. What do you think they should add to the Marvel game next as far as characters or teams? How often do you get to the great outdoors? Well, I'll start with the first one there. Gosh, there's really so many that I'd like, and I'll kind of rattle off some of the ones that I think I'd like to see. One of them I'd really like to see is the Fantastic Four. Now, I haven't really liked the recent movies for the Fantastic Four. I don't think they've done a good job on them. But the Fantastic Four is really classic Marvel, without a doubt. And it's really hard for me to think of the Marvel Universe without actually thinking about the Fantastic Four. And so, I think that would be one, and like Doctor Doom is sort of wrapped up in that, and so is Silver Surfer. Even he's like a cosmic character and would likely be the cosmic team. But I absolutely really like the Fantastic Four, and so I would be looking for them. Sorry, I may get interrupted here. I can hear the dog was barking, and I think I may be having one of my kids come to the door. Or maybe not. But, so that would be one that I would definitely like. I really, and Submariner, Prince Namor, who was really more of an antagonist in the Silver Age, Golden Age, like the early ages of Marvel, who later ended up being semi-good and kind of switching back and forth. Really a bit of an anti-hero. He's one of my favorite characters. And he also was wrapped up with the Fantastic Four. He was a bit of a competing love interest for Sue, the Invisible Woman, with Mr. Fantastic, Reed Richards, and so I really like to see him included. I really want to see the Grey Hulk, Mr. Fix-It, included, now that they have the Green Hulk. I really like, a lot of people don't know as much about these characters, but I really like the Soviet super soldiers, sort of like the, I don't know that they weren't so much they might have been a little bit of a Eastern Bloc answer to the Avengers in the comics, but they were definitely like Eastern European and Russian for the most part, but they had a lot of cool characters. And then like for the Hulk, I like the leader as an enemy. Old style comics, the leader, Brains versus Brawn. He's, for those of you that know him, but I could go on and on. So those are some of my picks. And then of course I want to see Silver Centurion Iron Man, because I really liked him growing up as well. Yeah, and how often do you get to the great outdoors? Well, as far as like going to complete bushwhacking, like something like that, where you're just like take a backpack and you just go out for a number of days, and I've done that kind of stuff when I was younger, and I talked about that in the last video a little bit when I was in college, like doing winter backpacking and stuff. I don't do that stuff anymore, really. It's not a matter of just having kids. I know that's a lot of people's excuse, although it is a good one. Like your life is definitely more complicated when you've got dependents. But my family does have a piece of property up north in Canada with a cabin. And we basically developed a property where you just sort of literally just cleared trees, like off of a rural road and like thick forest, and built a cabin in it. And it's close. It's not lakefront property, but it's close to where you could actually use a lake too, if you want to actually do some boating or something like that. And so we go there actually quite regularly. A lot of times when I talk on the channel that I'm out of town, like, or I've been out of town, or there's a long weekend and this stuff's kind of going on, I'm usually there. And so I would say that's outdoors, even though there's a town not far from there and things, it's still pretty much outdoors. I mean, when you wake up in the morning, there's a deer standing outside most of the time. And, there's a lot of critters, and it's wilderness for the most part. And so we go actually pretty often, actually, and it's really therapeutic. And I don't have cell reception there, really. I do have, it's gotten better over time, but I'm not very accessible. I can't really call with a phone. Like, I can get a little bit of data, but I don't really do much as far as, like, with the channel while I'm there. Sometimes I might answer a comment or something, because I can do that a little easier. But I don't actually do much, because a lot of times I'm a bit addicted. I'm kind of like talking back and forth with people that write comments or whatever when I have access. But there, we mostly aim to get away from everything. And one of the great things is, like, I have a 12-year-old and a 9-year-old, and they're just getting to the point where when we're at home, they either want to be with their friends or they want to be, locked in the room reading or, watching videos or something. And they just really, that's their idea for the most part of how they want to spend their time. And so we only have so many more years before they're out of the house altogether. And so when we go up there, we'll play board games or card games a lot. And a lot of it's traditional board games like Clue, and we play we play Uno and all that kind of stuff that the kids like to play too. But it really allows us to connect, and it allows us to get work out of our minds and things like that. We're not really approachable. Like my wife, actually, when she is in town, because she has a business, like a lot of times she gets called even when she's off of work. And so this allows her to completely get away too. And so it's a really nice thing. And it just feels a lot different than being in the city, that's for sure. So, because I live in a city, Calgary, that, it's multi-million. There's several, it's more than 1 million people here. It's actually, I think, closer to 2. And so you definitely know it when you get back here. So, yeah. So I think I am out of questions. I really appreciate, again, the folks throwing a question out for next time. It really makes a big difference, because I don't get a ton of questions. This time I was really happy. 7th episode, 7 questions. It was great. Sometimes, it is kind of light, and people, just maybe don't even have something they really want to ask that particular month. But yeah, if you've got an interesting one or something that you think would be a good question, please ask it, because I enjoy doing these, and hoping that it's something you guys are enjoying painting too as well. And I hate to say it, but next time, I don't know if summer will be officially over, but next time an episode comes up, it's pretty much going to be after August, which I always think of summer being over at that point. So enjoy the rest of the summer, everybody, and talk to you later.